Today we have several NHL news and rumor updates to talk about, including some trade rumors on the Minnesota Wild and defenseman Matt Dumba. We also have some rumors on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Could they still be working on that roster? Could we see another trade before the season starts? We also have some updates on the upcoming season and the teams running in to a bunch of positive tests on COVID-19. And we also have another signing by the Florida Panthers, which could turn out to be pretty significant. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here today. Let's kick things off with the Florida Panthers announcing a signing today on a one-year contract for Juho Lammikko, somebody who they actually had drafted back in 2014. He came over back 2 years ago, played a year in North America, played about, I think it was about 40 games with the Florida Panthers. Didn't have the greatest results, but was okay. Lammikko has played between Liga and the KHLs over the past two seasons. His numbers in Liga were actually phenomenal, pretty much on a point per game pace. So I can't help but wonder if this could turn out to be another similar signing like happened with Dodonov, who originally came over to the NHL with the Panthers. Didn't turn out the greatest, went back over, played in Russia for a few more years, and then came back and was a really solid hockey player. So obviously at this point, the player's a little bit older, a little bit more mature, he's gained some more valuable experience. So hopefully we'll see how this turns out for them. But I wonder with another signing like that, if that could pretty much signify the fact that they're likely, possibly done here when it comes to signing any free agents. We know there's still players out there like Mike Hoffman looking for work, of course, who was still most likely not returning to the Florida Panthers, but I wonder if this will signal possibly that they are not going to be bringing back the goal-scoring winger. He's mostly been linked to other teams here recently anyway, and I think it's fair to say in his case he's waiting for teams to clear some space to hopefully get the contract that he's looking for rather than take a pay cut, but we'll have to stay tuned on that. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some updates regarding COVID-19 impacting the NHL as well as the World Juniors. Now, we have word from a couple of different NHL franchises, including the Vegas Golden Knights and the Columbus Blue Jackets, that they've had several players more recently test positive for COVID-19, which obviously isn't a good thing. As of we know right now, none of them seem to be doing poorly with it. They all seem to be handling things well and are all isolating and getting better. As far as the details that were released, that we weren't told that anything was, severely complications or anything of that matter, which is good news. Obviously, the fact that they've been infected, though, is not great, but obviously those teams are not really able to do much right now in terms of informal training. A lot of NHL teams right now have a lot of informal stuff kind of going on while they're waiting for word on the NHL season that's hopefully coming up if they can get an agreement in place to return to play and get everything ironed out. Of course, we know the owners are looking for the players to defer more money as well as increase escrow a little bit. So that's something the players aren't happy about. We haven't had any updates the past couple of days. So I guess let's hope that no news is good news and things are being slowly worked out and ironed out here behind the scenes. Now, when it comes to the World Juniors, we had a case of Team Canada having to suspend activities, at least temporarily. I believe it was 2 players that they had test positive. They did have a positive test earlier in the training camp as well, which put quite a few people in isolation, including some of the coaches, due to potential exposure, which really left the coaching staff shorthanded, because anybody who was deemed to be a close contact of the players that were positive have to isolate for 14 days. And obviously at this point, the Team Canada and the roster here has to be set within a couple of weeks. It's really going to impact players possibly either making the roster, be able to showcase themselves, other players or coaches who may or may not be able to continue further. It's going to have a pretty good impact. Now, I don't at this point think that it's going to jeopardize the event. Of course, we know going into the bubble with the NHL setup, there was some early stuff going on and they were able to overcome. The same thing with the NHL teams as well, like with Columbus and Vegas. I don't really think at this point we have to really worry too much about it impacting the overall ability to have a season coming up. We saw numerous teams be impacted by this heading into the return to play, including the Tampa Bay Lightning, who had a bunch of positive tests as well, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. So it's just a matter of getting them into that bubble, a little bit deeper into things before they can be a little bit more secure and solid. Which is, obviously going to take a little bit of time here. Obviously, the NHL might have to reconsider, though, how it plans to approach the upcoming 2021 season. Instead of having teams all play in their individual buildings like they were hoping to, they may have to start the season with the hubs, like I had mentioned before, with each division maybe having one kind of hub city where they kind of rotate in and out of, and obviously playing 3 to 4 games a week or something to that effect. But it's pretty much a given, and we're still going to have the Canadian division and all that. We talked about the other division realignments that are likely going to take place, but we'll see. But it's certainly not the news we're hoping for with COVID impacting hockey around North America right now. Now, as I mentioned, we have some NHL trade rumors on teams like Minnesota and Toronto. Let's kick things off with the Minnesota Wild here. A couple of things on the Wild. One, first off, before we get into the rumors, well, they are expected to name a new team captain. GM Bill Guerin did confirm a new captain would be named. He felt it was very important and a role he wants to have on his team. Some teams choose to really wait or leave it kind of unoccupied or an empty slot for an extended time. We've seen some teams go 2, 3, 4 seasons without a captain where he doesn't want to do that, and he feels that there's enough good people and qualified players in the team to take on the role. So the Wild are expected to name a new captain relatively soon. I wouldn't think there's no big rush right now, but by the time we get a season lined up and get through camps, I would think before they actually play a game, they'll have that ironed out. Probably sometime during camp would be my guess. I would have to think that, possibly a long-time veteran like a guy like Ryan Suter would be a prime candidate. You'd have to think as well, maybe a bit of a dark horse, but somebody like a Jonas Brodin, who just signed a long-term contract extension, could possibly be considered as well. A guy like Suter, I think, would be a great candidate, but it depends on, I guess, if they want to have another transition in a few years or not, or how they want to go about things. But they do have some qualified people there in Minnesota, and they are expected to name a captain before the season gets underway. But the main trade rumors we want to focus on is defenseman Matt Dumba, who had a ton of speculation surrounding him earlier in the offseason. Nothing has come to be here as of yet, but of course, as we know, the Wild are very, very likely to lose him to the expansion draft if they do not trade him. And obviously, when they get to that point, they're going to have to expose a good player, and Dumba could be that guy. So they're not going to let that happen. They're going to make a move and work things out here before that, because clearly a team would be, they have options. They're not going to be that crazy to leave a player like Dumba available because they know he'd be snagged up by the Kraken in no time at all. The latest update, though, from Bill Guerin kind of indicates he's not really actively shopping Dumba, and he's quite content to start the season with him in their lineup, which totally makes sense to me. I can understand that he talked to a lot of teams around the NHL earlier in the offseason, and the deal that he was really looking for just wasn't quite there. You're not going to give away a player like that if the deal you want and the return you really feel you need and deserve for the quality of the player you're looking to trade is not really happening. You've got to be patient and hang on to him. Clearly they want a top 6 center or a really top goal-scoring winger. Ideally, though, a center would be preferable given the lack of depth. I know they've made some other moves to somewhat address that position throughout the offseason, but I'm still not convinced they really have the greatest lineup when it comes to the center position, and a major upgrade there could be something that would come in handy for sure. I mean, we talked before about the Calgary Flames looking possibly for a right shot defenseman. Maybe a guy like Monahan might become available. We looked at some other options around the league as well. Dumba was linked to numerous teams, but there was a lot of the teams who would want a right shot D like Dumba. They just don't have what Minnesota's looking for. There was a few teams, but not many, who would kind of be willing to part with that. So obviously, if a deal comes to be, I think a deal like that is still going to take place. Guerin is not going to get through the next season without trading Dumba. I think that's pretty much a given. It's just a matter of finding that right offer. So even though he's not actively shopping him, if a team wants to call and inquire on Dumba, I think the answer would be he is available for the right price, and that's going to be a solid top 6 center. Or unless a team like Winnipeg, for example, wants to offer up a Patrick Laine or something to that effect, I think they would entertain that kind of offer. But otherwise, he's going to hang on to him, get the value he's looking for down the road, and see what he can do. But certainly we'll expect a trade on that front sometime before the expansion draft for sure. Now, the other article I want to take a look at here is from the Toronto Sun and Steve Simmons talking about, he has sources that say that he believes that the Leafs are not quite done dealing yet. And if you look at their lineup, he feels they're calling around the league, trying to improve the number 3 center position. Now, some people might find that a little odd, given the other moves they've made this season. To a degree, I don't 100% agree with his theory on that as well. But obviously, I want to take a look at it and analyze it from our perspective here as well. So if you take a look at it, he goes on to say that Joe Thornton is not really a 200-foot player at this stage of his career anymore, given the fact his knees aren't really all that great, which I do somewhat concur with, although he has looked really good and playing really solid over in Switzerland while he's waiting for the NHL season to get started. So obviously, that's a good positive sign for Thornton. He feels that Alex Kerfoot's a better winger than a center. I somewhat agree with that as well, so I don't completely disagree with the theory that it might be a weak point on the team, but at the same time, I'm not sure that the Leafs are really going to find the right deal to make that kind of deal. But at the same time, I guess you never know. And I'm sure that if you're Kyle Dubas, you're always scanning the NHL, seeing if you can make your team better. That's the job of a general manager, is to listen to offers, look around, and always be finding a way to improve if you're able to. Now, I guess if you take a look at some guys that could be available, you can maybe look to a guy like Derek Stepan, for example, in the Coyotes organization. There's other players that would be a veteran guy, somebody who can play a little bit more defensively responsible, decent on face-off, that type of thing, would be the kind of player that you're looking for. Right now, the Leafs are going to be needing to find a little bit of cap space as it is, so clearly a decent amount of money would go out, and you'd have to think the prime target would be Alex Kerfoot and or Pierre Engvall would be the main ones to be traded if they are going to make a move, although I'm not convinced they will. I mean, when you have Joe Thornton, you have Jason Spezza, you have Alex Kerfoot, you have several other players who can play the wing that they've signed. They have some other guys as well. They brought in VC and Boyd, and they got Barabanov coming over from Russia to try to make the team as well. They have a lot of wing options. So I think from the wing perspective, to move a guy like Thornton or Kerfoot to the wing, to some extent might make sense if the right upgrade was available, but it's going to push somebody else out of your lineup as well, and I'm just not really sure that they're going to do that. Now, to me, what would make more sense, if the Leafs start the season, if they struggle at all, or if they find they're giving up too many goals against and they're not strong enough defensively in the bottom six, then I can see them maybe pulling off a trade before the deadline to maybe tighten that up a little bit, and maybe at that point a guy like Kerfoot could be moved, or maybe a combination of other players as well. There's certainly some other guys who you could deem to be tradable assets as well, whether it be Engvall, Kerfoot, even to an extent a guy like Dermott on defense. I mean, it's going to depend on what the other team you're dealing with really wants or needs out of the situation. But the Leafs, I don't think will be swinging for a trade, but I wouldn't completely rule it out. But at this point, I just wanted to bring it up because it was in the Toronto Sun, but I'm not sure we're going to see that kind of trade. But let me know what you think. Is the third line center position for the Maple Leafs a weak point? And do you see Kyle Dubas actively trying to make some upgrades here before the NHL season gets underway? If you do think that's likely, give me your ideas down below on who they could be targeting and what kind of trade package might be required to make it happen. Let me know your thoughts on that and everything else discussed here today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.